Imagine being born with a single mark that shapes your whole life. Not a blessing, but a burden. Tonight, we step into ancient Persia, where a newborn prince entered the world with hair as white as snow. His name was Zal, pronounced with a long Zal, and soon a bird of legend would hear him, the Simurgh. This tale is one of the warmest chapters from the Shahnameh, the great Persian Book of Kings. It is a story of forgiveness, quiet strength, and the hope carried with indifference. Listen closely as the first cry of this child rises. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment on which other legends you would like us to make a video about. A child was born into silk, but not into welcome. The attendants of the Persian court bent over the infant only to draw back in unease. His hair, white from the very beginning, caught the lamplight and shimmered against the darkness of the chamber. It was no ordinary feature. In that time and in that place, such a mark was seen not as beauty, but as an omen. A newborn crowned with snow-white strands was thought to carry ill fortune, a warning pressed into the very body of the child. For King Sam, both warrior and ruler, the sight was heavier than any battlefield wound. He had led armies and kept faith with tradition, unshaken before human enemies. But as he gazed at his son, still fragile and wrapped in silks, the king's heart turned uncertain. The customs that shaped his life whispered to him that such a child would bring misfortune to his people. In a court where omens guided judgment, his fear was shared. Eyes lowered, lips pressed tight, not one voice rose to challenge what all had been taught to believe. So, the unthinkable was spoken. Sam declared his son cursed, unfit for throne or court, unfit even for a father's embrace. There would be no cradle songs, no tutors waiting with scrolls, no proud announcement of an heir. For this child, only silence. The decision was harsh, but in Sam's mind, it was also necessary. To keep the boy was to invite disaster. To cast him away was to Sam a grim duty. The infant was given a name, Zal, but not a place among kin. Already his life bent away from an ordinary prince's path. Instead of bright chambers, he was carried into the open night. Instead of rejoicing, there was rejection. That early act, not the birth itself, shaped the beginning of his story. The place chosen for abandonment was Mount Alborz, vast and steep, touched always by the cold winds of high peaks. It was no accident. To leave a child there was the same as surrendering him to the greater powers of the world. Sam, bound by the weight of belief, ordered his soldiers to carry the boy into the mountains. The climb was long, their steps reluctant, hands heavy with the small bundle swaddled close. They knew what waited at the journey's end. When they reached a ledge high above the valleys, they obeyed the command. They laid the newborn upon bare stone. Around him, the air grew thin, sharp against the skin, and shadows stretched wide from the cliffs. His cries, small, uncertain, but steady, rose into the mountain wind. To imagine it now is to feel the stillness of that height, pressing from every side. No walls to hold the echoes, no hearth to soften sound, only rock and the endless sweep of sky. Zal's wail cut across open air, fragile but refusing to vanish. Against ancient cliffs, that sound seemed impossibly small, and yet it endured. The act was not simply a warrior king's personal fear, nor the whim of superstition alone. It was the voice of a culture that read omens in the marks of birth, a world in which difference was never random, but always a sign. White hair at the cradle was thought to unbalance order itself. To follow belief, Sam turned from his son. And so a single life was left open to the fates of the mountain. At night on Alborz, the vast quiet deepened. Stars hung above like distant watchers, shining cold light across the stone. The infant stirred, arms no stronger than a bird's wing. His cries rose again and again, softer each time, then gathering breath once more. The mountain gave no answer. Imagine standing there, in that thin air, hearing a sound too small for such towering heights. Could such crying reach anyone who might care? Who could bend to listen among stone cliffs and silent sky? The story waits in that long breath of silence. A child abandoned, a cry carried upward by the wind. Into this stillness lingers a question, quiet but insistent. If no human heart dared to answer, what kind of ear might hear instead? High on the slopes of Mount Alborz, another life stirred. Not human, not bound by palaces or courts, but older, vaster, and kinder. This was the home of the Simurgh, the watchful bird of the mountain. Her presence was spoken of in stories for centuries, a being of sky and stone, both majestic and maternal. In different tellings she is painted in many ways, peacock-like with hints of lion or dog, or sometimes simply a vast, shining bird, always wise and kindly. Her feathers were said to shimmer like copper and gold. Her wings, so wide they could veil valleys, moved with a strength that shaped the world below. Myths even whisper that when she stirs her wings, the seeds of life scatter from the sacred tree at the center of creation, drifting into soil, bringing healing and growth. She belongs not only to the earth beneath her talons, nor only to the endless sky, but to both, a bridge between. It was from this high dwelling, near the glittering crest of the Mountain of Gems, that she looked down upon the ridges below. Her eyes were brighter than falcon's sight, and she could rest for ages between blinks, watching the slow turn of seasons as if they were the breathing of the world. She had seen empires rise and vanish, rivers carve valleys, and countless winters pass. Yet on one night, her gaze settled with care upon something small. Across stone and silence, the sound of a newborn reached her, thin, fragile, but steady. To a creature who measured time in centuries, the tremor of such a sound might have been nothing. And yet, she listened. Her neck arched, her gaze sharpened, and the immense form shifted its weight. Compassion, not hunger, drew her downward. Imagine her shape against the stars, a shadow vast enough to dim the sky, descending with a softness out of proportion to her size. Wings folded gently inward, slowing the air around her. The rush of her descent did not break the stillness, but carried a whisper. On the stone ledge, the abandoned child shivered, his cries faltering. Then a canopy of feathers, gold and red in the faint starlight, drew over him. Calm followed, as if even fear hushed itself in the presence of her quiet care. This bird of legend is often remembered as a symbol of wisdom and might. But in this moment, she was more than symbol. She was a mother. Long life had given her patience. Deep knowing had given her gentleness. The talons that could have crushed instead hovered softly. The beak that could have struck leaned near without threat. She bent close, she gathered, she lifted. The boy, still fragile and wrapped in a cloth quickly dampened with mountain air, was now cupped against her breast, as if held in a cradle formed of feathers. The image is simple, yet grand. The white-haired infant, once branded as cursed, carried upward into the night by wings wide as sails. The mountain peaks tilted away beneath their rise. Toward a nest woven into sheer cliff faces, the Simurgh bore him. Few men had ever reached so high. The mountain of gems gleamed faint as fire hidden in stone, and there she laid him within a home not made by human hands. What was despair only moments ago became something softer, refuge. You may ask, why would such a being care for one forsaken boy? The stories do not always give reason in the way kings and scribes explain decisions. What they tell is this: she cared because there was life, and life was hers to guard. She listened to what others refused to hear. To her, omen had no weight. Breath was enough. And so the one abandoned by men was received by a mother from the sky. The nest itself was more than a hollow of branches. Old tales say it was crafted with boughs unseen by ordinary eyes, with strands glinting as if plucked from light or treasure. It rested against cliff walls beyond reach, a sanctuary between earth and heaven. Into this cradle of twined wood and guarded height, the child found warmth. Tucked under wings vast enough to blanket the air, he was fed as one of her own, soothed against the rhythm of her steady heart. There is a quiet elegance in this shift, from rejection to nurture, from fear to embrace. Many cultures tell of children spared by the kindness of nature, but here, the guardian is one who spans both natural and divine. Her mercy was not only rescue, it was acceptance. In her care, Zal's difference was no curse. The white strands upon his head became unremarkable under her gaze. She saw only a life worth guarding. Now think of his first days in that nest. No chamber walls, no servants' whispers, only the warmth of immense wings lowering with each breath, the hush of feathers enclosing him like night, the glow of eyes that had studied centuries but now softened for him alone. He reached toward colors that shimmered against her body. He learned to rest under beating wings the size of towering trees. In these sounds and touches, he received a new childhood, simple and steady. This guardian of creation is often told to have lived 1,000 years. She had scattered seeds when she flew, shaken healing across earth, dwelled near the tree of life at the heart of myths. Yet no act of grandeur could match the quiet work of rocking an infant in her shadow. If she embodied balance between sky and soil, this was balance in another form, a giant caring for the smallest, a timeless one pausing for the fragile moment of a child's beginning. In the telling, this is where the story itself finds peace. The mountain that had seemed merciless now held shelter. The destiny that looked broken now waited with patience. For Zal, each meal the bird gave, each night he slept tucked beneath plumage warmer than any cloak, confirmed one truth. His life had meaning, even when men had denied it. The Simurgh had answered with care where fear had spoken only shame. She watched him. She taught him quiet by her example, and she kept him safe. The boy who might have ended in silence now carried forward. Far below, palaces and courts had forgotten him. But higher, wrapped in gold feathers, he breathed safely. And so the story rests at a threshold. What rises next will be no less wonder. The shaping of a prince not by kings, but by a teacher of wings. What wisdom can such an ancient bird give to a boy waiting to grow? That is the path the tale now opens. On the high slopes of Alborz, the boy found not just shelter, but teaching. The Simurgh was more than a guardian. She became his first and truest instructor. This was the season of lessons, learned in a nest rather than a palace, carried on mountain winds instead of courtly speeches. She gave him direction with patience, shaping his life with wisdom steadier than steel. Her teaching began with sound. Zal grew up listening to her calls, long, low tones that lingered in the air, steady and measured. From these, he learned rhythm before words. Each pause, each rise and fall, taught him the value of speaking with care. Later, when he addressed others, his voice carried that calm weight. Where others rushed to fill silence, Zal's words came slow, deliberate, touched with the music of the mountain. She also carried a healer's wisdom. In the old stories, the feathers of the Simurgh are filled with blessings. When one of her chicks was hurt, she brushed a plume against the wound. It soothed, it steadied, it seemed to draw life back into balance. Zal, still small, watched closely. He saw how gentleness could repair what pain threatened to break. He imitated her touch on the scrapes and bruises of his own climbing, understanding slowly that the act of caring carried power. In myth, her feathers heal, but the lesson he absorbed was deeper. That true mending begins with intent and attention. From her, Zal also learned patience. Days in the nest were marked by change of season, not by hurried clocks. Storms raged, winds pinned them in place, yet the Simurgh waited soundlessly for the world to calm. Her stillness showed him that strength was not always action. Often it was restraint. Young as he was, restless to know the valleys beyond, he tried at times to wander. She drew him back softly, reminding him that every journey needs its right moment. In time, waiting became one of his greatest strengths. In later trials, when warriors would rush to strike, he remembered the virtue of pausing. Part of her teaching lay in the quiet itself. She would stop when the wind shifted and wait, listening. Zal would follow her gaze toward clouds shaped strangely, or birds flying out of season. He was taught without words. Watch, listen, recognize small signs before storms. He learned that silence itself has messages. Through small examples, he became a boy tuned to the world's subtleties. These quiet habits, practiced under wings, would shape the ways he faced his future. The mountain, too, was part of his schooling. Picture Zal at the edge of the nest. The valleys stretched far below. The cliffs taught him distance. The open sky taught him measure. Watching the Simurgh in flight, he began to see life as a pattern of rising, circling, and return. Clouds drifting, shadows crossing stone, birds gathering before rain, all served as lessons. Each dawn and dusk turned like pages in a book only he could read. This was education not of scrolls, but of sky and stone. Her lessons reached further still. She guided him to respect the lives around him. Tiny creatures crawling across bark, winds threading through pine, all found a place in her gaze. From her and absorbed a sense that nothing living was beneath notice. This care instilled in him compassion, a quality that grew beside his strength. He would one day lead not by fear, but by seeing worth in all he guarded, and in her presence grew his awareness of harmony. Her songs filled the nest, soft, full of patience, reminding him that life moves best in balance. They taught him to hear not just the surface of events, but to sense the deeper rhythms beneath. This too was knowledge he carried forward, that listening carefully reveals truths missed by hurried eyes. As the years passed, Zal's difference was no longer a curse in his heart. He carried white hair still, but it no longer bound him to shame. The Simurgh had shown him that what others feared could be strength. Her music had shaped his calm speech. Her feathers had guided his hands to heal. Her patience steadied his restless spirit. Her silences taught him to notice what is hidden. With this foundation, he grew into someone both gentle and strong, marked not by rejection, but by resilience. The old epics remind us that these mountain lessons were never wasted. What he learned in the high nest would later guide how he led, how he fought, how he loved. A pause before action, care before judgment, healing before anger. These simple habits, first found beside a mother of feathers, became the measure of his life. Yet time does not wait, even on sacred peaks. Seasons carried Zal upward into youth, taller and steadier than before. He had everything a teacher could give, and more. Still, one truth pressed gently on both child and guardian. No bond remains unchanged forever. Lessons end, journeys continue. The world outside the nest was waiting. And so, as the boy grew into the strength of a young man, the Simurgh began to prepare for what would come after. In the stories, her love did not fade with distance. She looked for a way to remain near even when her wings no longer shadowed his steps. What token could preserve the bond they had built? What sign could carry her care into the life he had yet to walk? The answer to that question would become her parting gift. A gift outlasting the nest, outlasting her presence on the high cliffs. It was small, light as a feather, yet strong enough to guard him in the world below. Before release came the most tender farewell. The Simurgh, who had sheltered Zal through hunger, storms, and passing seasons, now faced the moment when her foster child would step away from the cliffside nest and walk again among men. The boy who had been left to die had grown into youth, steady and bright-eyed, tempered by patience. Yet for all his strength and learning, he was still human. The time had come for him to return to the world of villages, courts, and kinship. She could not keep him, though her care had been constant. The silence between them carried one lingering question. If she could not remain beside him, what could she place in his hands that would still carry her love? It is here the old stories speak of the feathers. Different tellings give Zal 2 or 3. Some traditions say 3 golden feathers, others record only 2. Either way, they were not ordinary plumes shed at random, but chosen with care and given with thought. She loosened them from her own wings and offered them as tokens he could use in moments of need. When burned, even with the smallest flame, the feathers would call her back across impossible distance. In this way, she gave him not only an object, but a way of keeping her near. Through them, her presence could return whenever danger pressed too close. This was no mere keepsake. The feathers held her promise of continuing protection, though his path would lead beyond the mountains. Stories of the Simurgh often describe her as a healer, her feathers carrying powers of renewal. So too in this parting moment. By gifting them, she ensured that her care would reach past the boundaries of place and time. Zal did not receive jewels or weapons as other princes might. He received what was rarer, a bridge back to the wisdom of his guardian. The lesson carried by this gift was simple but deep. Love, she showed him, can release what it cherishes, yet still give something to carry forward. To love without possession was her final teaching. The nest had been his classroom, the mountains his first kingdom, but these feathers were the seal upon his childhood, a way to hold fast to what he had been given even as he walked somewhere new. The oral traditions surrounding this story often shift in detail, but the core never wavers. Whether 2 feathers or 3, the meaning is the same. Zal could summon her should trials demand it. For those who told the tale around fires and in courts, the feathers were not just magical aids, but symbols of hope. They reminded listeners that no one is ever entirely alone if love has left a mark upon them. In this way, the myth moved from mountain heights into the hearts of those who heard it. Imagine Zal as he held them for the first time. The feathers were broad in his hands, each one light yet strong. He did not test them, for their use was not for ordinary days. Instead, he accepted them with the solemnity that passed between foster child and guardian. With that simple giving, the long bond of care was made enduring. She had raised him from fragile cries to steady footsteps, and now she gave him a touchstone to return to when the world grew uncertain. Parting often carries pain, yet the Simurgh framed it with gentleness. She did not cling, though her heart held years of watching over him. She did not weep, though release must have felt heavy even to such a vast and ancient being. She taught by her own restraint that to give freely is the highest form of care. The feathers were her way of blessing his steps without binding them. One day he would need to walk alone, to face quarrels of men and trials of rule. But with every step, her invisible wings would still travel at his side. This giving was also a recognition of who Zal was becoming. No longer an abandoned infant, he now carried within him strength, patience, and the healing habits she had shaped. With the feathers, he carried outward proof that his life had value beyond what his father's eyes once judged. He was not cursed, he was chosen. Where once he had been marked only by difference, now he held tokens affirming that difference as sacred. The feathers tied him not only to his foster mother, but to the greater cycle of life that she herself embodied. The simplicity of the objects belied the gravity of their meaning. Unlike crowns or swords, they held no weight or sharpness. Yet in them lay a deeper authority, the ability to call wisdom greater than his own, to summon protection when human strength failed. The people who later heard of this gift would see it as a sign that the divine itself had claimed Zal, marking him not as outcast but as favored. The feathers became everlasting reminders of his bond with forces older and kinder than any throne. Even so, to accept them was not easy. To leave the nest was to leave the sounds of wings that had lulled him to sleep, the steady gaze that watched through all change of sky. In his heart, he may have wished to remain. Yet the feathers reminded him he would not go without memory or aid. They were love shaped into something portable. He would carry mountain and bird with him, even in valleys and courts far below. Listeners of the tale often dwell here a moment, picturing the youth's first steps away, with the tokens hidden close, waiting for the day they might be needed. The gifts also created suspense for those who heard the story told aloud. When, they wondered, would Zal burn them? What hazard would prove so dire that he would call back the guardian? In planting that question, the feathers pulled strands of the future into the present telling, promising listeners that the tale's wonder was not yet finished. For us, told quietly now in this retelling, their meaning feels steady and universal. When we part from those we love, we too look for small tokens, a letter saved, a voice remembered, a keepsake kept close. Myths reach toward the same truth. Separation need not erase connection. In the story of Zal, the Simurgh offers not just magic, but recognition of this human longing. She gives what all parents, teachers, or guardians seek to leave, signs that their care walks alongside, even when they cannot. As Zal stood ready to descend from the heights, the Simurgh watched with calm eyes. She had taught, she had guided, now she released. Her wings closed slowly over the nest, no longer a cradle but a memory. And in her gaze as he walked away, there was not grief but trust. She had given what she could, wisdom, patience, healing, and a gift to summon her in crisis. He would step into a world that once denied him, yet he would not arrive empty-handed. That soft farewell lingers as one of the story's gentlest truths. What began with rejection on cold stone now carried forward as protection offered with love. The boy once left to die was now equipped to live, guarded by a bond stronger than fear. And somewhere below, the human world stirred with whispers of a child thought lost, a child marked white-haired, who had grown into someone different than expected. What happens then, when such whispers drift back through palace gateways, reaching the ears of a king who once cast his son aside? In time, the story of a youth shaped by the mountain reached back to his father's court. At first, they were scattered reports, passed along quietly, as if too unlikely to be true. Yet each account carried the same thread. A boy with white hair had not only survived, but grown tall, calm, and steady. His voice was measured, his presence softened tempers, and even the hardened claimed he seemed born to lead. These were not the words of rumor alone. They gathered into something King Sam could no longer dismiss. For the king, the weight of recognition fell slowly, then all at once. He had left his infant son on Alborz, convinced the mark of white hair was a curse. Now he learned that the child lived, and not weakly, but with strength and wisdom. Pride could not shield him from this truth. Sam felt shame, then a quiet, human regret. The judgment he once called necessary now revealed itself as fear. A warrior could face enemies without weakness, yet facing his own choice was harder still. The son he had abandoned carried dignity where he himself had yielded to superstition. Shame pressed on him until he could no longer remain still. So he turned back to the mountain, though his steps were slower this time. This was no march of conquest with banners and trumpets. It was a journey stripped of display, a hard climb toward the place where memory cut deepest. Soldiers rode with him, but those who loved him saw a different figure now. Their commander looked less a victor than a man carrying the weight of his own error. The road into Alborz wound upward with stone and thinning air. Sam knew these paths, for he had led troops across them before. Yet where once the echoes had sung with triumph, now the cliffs only whispered of that first cry he had left in silence. Every ridge seemed to ask whether he would be met with anger or with rejection from the son he had wronged. What if Zal turned him aside as he had once turned his son away? When the storytellers of Persia reached this part of the tale, they asked their listeners to sit with that tension. Father and son stood on opposite sides of a wound, one marked by remorse, the other by memory. The question was not only what Sam would say, but whether forgiveness could cross the space where trust had been broken. In these moments of pause, the strength of the story emerges, not battles, but the quieter struggle of admitting wrong. News of his father's approach reached Zal on the mountain. He had grown under wings that taught patience and compassion. Still, he felt the stirring of old questions. A man who once branded him cursed now sought him out. Should past cruelty bar the gate to welcome? Should silence remain unbroken between them? Zal breathed the lessons of the Simurgh, the pause before speaking, the calm regard, Korsaud before judgment. He knew bitterness would only deepen the scar. At last, father and son beheld one another. Sam saw before him not an outcast, but a youth steady and tall. Zal's white hair still shone, yet it crowned him with dignity rather than shame. In that moment, the king's voice broke from its long silence. He named his error plainly, and he lowered his pride in front of his men. Words of confession left his lips, brief but powerful in what they yielded. A warrior's strength had been his command. Now it was his humility. The air held stillness then, like a long-held breath. Zal, remembering the gentleness of his guardian, chose not to strike with rejection. Instead, he opened his arms. In that embrace on the mountain slope, resentment slipped away. Two figures met, one aged by regret, the other shaped by patience, and for the first time their bond became whole. The moment was quiet, but strong enough to linger through generations of telling. This forgiveness did more than soothe wounded hearts. By accepting Sam, Zal stepped back into his father's line. He was restored not only as a son, but as heir. The branch once severed returned to the living tree. And from this restored lineage, later heroes would come. Most of all Rostam, the greatest warrior of the Persian epic. So the embrace between father and son was both tender and historic. His forgiveness reopened the line that would later bear great heroes. Even here, the Simurgh's influence whispered between them. She did not appear with wings spread across the sky, nor did her cry echo down the ridges. But the patience she had taught, the healing she had shown, prepared Zal for this choice. Without her years of care, his heart might have hardened. Instead, her lessons unfolded in his decision to forgive. Though absent, her presence shaped the quiet of their reconciliation. Imagine the look of Sam's soldiers as they witnessed this meeting. They had braced for confrontation, perhaps a bitter reckoning. Instead, they saw father and son joined in acceptance. No sword was raised, no accusing word shouted. Only the simple truth that error could be confessed and injury could be answered with compassion. The mountain seemed to hold its own silence after, as though observing the peace that settled there. This tale persisted not only because it belongs to kings, but because it belongs to all listeners. Parents regret choices, children carry scars, and reconciliation can feel impossible. Yet, in this image of white hair framed with honor, and of a warrior kneeling with humility, the story offers gentleness. Mistakes can soften, estrangement can end. What once divided can be healed by acceptance. Generation after generation repeated the scene, not for spectacle, but because it carried peace. A ruler laid down his pride, and a son's compassion bridged the distance between them. By that simple act, a family was restored, and the chain of inheritance that would shape future legends was made whole again. High above, though unseen, the guardian bird remained part of the story. Her care had prepared Zal to listen more than speak, to pause before anger, and to heal when hurt might have ruled instead. That unseen guidance flowed through this moment. A mighty king bent in regret, a son lifted in understanding. Both found their union in the wisdom she had planted. The embrace concluded the wound between them, but it did not conclude the tale. Life beyond the mountain still lay ahead. The world of men, with its struggles and trials, awaited Zal. For now he had regained not only a father, but his place within heritage, and through that restoration, the epic moved forward. As the story rests here, the mood is calm. Forgiveness carried the day, and reconciliation soothed the air around them. Yet destiny does not pause. For soon, another trial will arise, one that reaches into the heart of family again. It will not come through rejection, but through the risk of birth itself, a night when both mother and child trembled in peril, and when the memory of the Simurgh's gift would once more be called upon. Love can steady many storms, yet sometimes even love must face trials too heavy for human strength alone. When Zal wed Rudaba, their union surprised many. She was the daughter of a rival house, and their bond crossed lines of old distrust. But affection prevailed, and soon expectancy brought hope into the halls of their court. That hope was joined with growing fear, for Rudaba carried a child unlike others. He was already large, heavy within her, and as the months passed, whispers spread that she bore not only a son, but a destiny. The day of birth came with difficulty that no physician could master. Rudaba struggled for hour upon hour, her breath harsh, her face pale. Physicians skilled in herbs, prayers, and treatments crowded her chamber, but found their remedies powerless. They offered chants, drafts, and the steady presence of hands accustomed to wounds of war. Yet none could relieve the pain. Time passed, and with it the strength of both mother and unborn child waned. The crisis pressed heavier with each cry that shook the room. In those dim hours, wealth and wisdom seemed alike undone. Zal stood nearby in dread. He had been taught patience. He had carried calm speech and healing habits from his years under the great bird's care. But here, every skill failed him. A husband, a father-to-be, yet helpless before his wife's suffering. Only one memory stirred as light in the dark. The feathers given so long ago, still hidden and safe. Tokens of the Simurgh, woven with promise. If flame touched them, her aid would return. So Zal withdrew quietly, lifted a feather, and placed it to fire. It caught and curled. Smoke rose, forming a signal unlike any other, both prayer and command. The chamber's silence deepened, as if the world itself paused. Some said the air shifted. Others felt a rush, subtle but sure, as if vast wings stirred somewhere beyond sight. The summons had been heard. The Simurgh answered without delay. Once she had cradled Zal when he was defenseless. Now she came for him again, carrying wisdom not found among men. This was her gift, knowledge older than kingdoms and deeper than scrolls. Where mortal healers despaired, her counsel bridged what seemed impossible. She spoke of a way no human dared attempt. To save mother and child, Rudaba's body must be opened, the infant gently lifted forth. In our world, we call it cesarean. In the epic, it was a divine instruction, tender yet clear. Her voice soothed fear. She gave simple guidance, each word measured and calm. Where to place the blade, how to keep the cut steady, how to protect the mother's life even as the child emerged. Zal, trembling, listened with focus. Physicians who had failed stepped back and followed her counsel. In their actions lay both desperation and hope, trust in the unseen wing that shadowed them. The moment stretched like a string ready to snap. Then release. From Rudaba came forth her child. He was wider of shoulder, greater of presence than many newborns. His cry rang out, not fragile but strong, reverberating across the hall. A life destined for tale and legend opened his eyes upon the world. Beside him, though drained and weak, Rudaba breathed still. Her life had been saved alongside her son's. Relief swept all present. In one night, sorrow had shifted into blessing. The child born was Rostam, who would stand among the greatest of Persian heroes. Because of that night, Persian songs would carry his name through centuries. But in that moment, he was simply a child alive with his mother's hand upon him, both spared by the wisdom of a guardian bird. The Simurgh's act was quiet as always. She did not demand praise nor linger for glory. Her aid was not spectacle, but knowledge freely shared. She showed that greatness is not only in flying high, but in guiding hands to save lives. She had once taught Zal patience. Now she offered skill to preserve the ones he loved. The bond between them deepened a second time, joining childhood rescue to family salvation. This story held power for those who first heard it. Fathers knew the fear of losing both wife and newborn. Mothers knew the danger that each birth could bring. Healers knew the limits of their remedies. In the tale, all found comfort. That compassion greater than human could step in where human power faltered. To burn a single feather was to reach across worlds, to remind humanity that they were not abandoned in their most fragile hours. Zal himself must have felt humbled. White-haired and scorned at birth, he had been kept alive by mercy. Now, through him, mercy extended again, ensuring not only his survival, but his family's continuation. In the voice of the Simurgh, he heard once more the patient lessons she had instilled. To call her was to admit need. To follow her instructions was to embrace humility. Both acts brought life where despair had nearly triumphed. When listeners spoke of Rostam in later stories, they always circled back to this origin. His first breath came not easily, but through miracle. His greatness was built upon survival against the weight of impossible beginning. And the Simurgh, though unseen in his deeds to come, shaped the course of his life from that very instant of birth. The scene offers us something beyond myth. It tells us that wisdom is not bound by one generation. The Simurgh cared for Zal as an infant, guided him as a man, and then protected his child. Her wings stretched across family lines. Her teaching moved beyond years. Her mercy traveled forward through time. For the people who recited the Shahnameh, it was proof that compassion echoes. What begins as care for one has ripples that protect many. Imagine now the hall after. The flame from the feather dimmed, smoke curling out of sight. Mother and child were soothed, breath slow, pain eased. Silence wrapped the chamber, not with dread this time, but with rest. Above them, the mountain winds moved, empty once more of wings, but heavy with the memory of what had passed. From this moment, the story bends toward new life. Rostam's cry was only the beginning, a note that promised deeds to come. For Zal, his fatherhood began with gratitude rather than grief. For Rudaba, survival meant embrace and future rather than shadows of loss. The Simurgh's gift had not only saved them, it had set the stage for what their son would become. This is why the moment remained sacred in retelling. It revealed that even heroes need guidance. Even destinies begin in vulnerability. Even strength is born through aid. Rostam's story, though filled with battles and triumphs, first belonged to love at risk and a feather burned in faith. And yet, this was not the end of her care. The question remained softly in the hearts of listeners. Does the Simurgh's presence fade once Zal and Rudaba are safe? Or might her watch stretch onward toward the life of the child she had guarded before birth? The old tellings hint that her care does not end, but continues, appearing again in new forms when it is most needed. Rostam's life carried him into battles that tested not only his arm, but his spirit. As the years unfolded, he became Persia's great champion, the warrior whose name shielded kingdoms and settled fear. From village hearths to royal courts, he was celebrated as protector and defender. Power followed him, and his strength remained unmatched. Yet every champion discovers that there comes a trial no muscle can overcome. For Rostam, that trial appeared in the figure of Esfandiar. Esfandiar was no ordinary rival. By divine blessing, his body was invulnerable. His skin resisted blades, his muscles did not yield to spear or arrow. Against him, every strike sounded hollow, like iron on rock. To face him was to face a wall without opening. Persia itself seemed caught between two powers. Rostam, the beloved defender, and Esfandiar, the invincible heir. One would continue, the other must fall. Rostam fought him bravely, but each attempt ended in futility. Sword strokes clattered away, arrows scattered harmlessly. Even his own endurance, vast as it was, began to falter. Imagine a warrior known for certainty, suddenly meeting the edge of despair, realizing that strength alone could not carry him across. He stood at a breaking point. To fight further was to lose. To surrender was to abandon the people he served. In Persian epics, when will fails and despair closes in, it is often not brute power, but dreams that open another path. To sleep can become a doorway, dreams carrying truths hidden while waking. One night, exhausted by struggle, Rostam lay still, and in the hush of deep rest came a vision. He did not see battlefields in that vision. He saw instead a vast presence descending through his dream, wings spread in calm dominion. Though he had never met her with waking eyes, he recognized her. This was the Simurgh, the eternal guardian who had long guided his family. In her there was no anger, no thunder, only softness, quiet strength, and the gravity of age beyond measure. Rostam, who had stood unshaken before beasts and armies, felt humbled. He stood not as conqueror, but as seeker. The bird of ages spoke with tenderness, but also certainty. She revealed what no warrior's eye could find. Esfandiar's body, hardened to every weapon, hid one unguarded place. His eyes, soft and open, remained untouched by divine protection. That fragile point was the doorway through which victory could come. In the dream, the Simurgh's message carried no riddle. She spoke plainly, to strike not everywhere, but once, at the place left vulnerable. The fight was not endless. It had a single mark by which to end. Rostam awoke with her words pressing steady upon his mind. This was no ordinary dream, soon lost to memory. In the Persian imagination, such visions were recognized as messages of guidance. Wisdom flowed across the fragile border of sleep, where mortal need and timeless guardians could meet. Rostam understood both the burden and the gift. To strike the eyes meant harm of the most piercing kind, yet with that act alone balance could be restored. The clarity shaped his next steps. He prepared one arrow, not a volley, not endless attempts at force, but a single shaft crafted with care, a weapon guided in thought as much as skill. The act was not reckless, but measured, born of listening. His true weapon was not muscle now, but attention to counsel. When they faced each other again, Esfandiar stood unbroken, his strength shining as always. Rostam met him with quiet resolve. He lifted the bow. Breath slowed, silence filled the air. One arrow carried the sum of dream and decision. Released, it flew swift and direct. It sought the place no armor covered, the place revealed by the Simurgh's words. It struck true, and the invincible prince, untouchable until that moment, was undone. The victory did not lift Rostam into triumphal joy. The weight of sorrow lay close, for no champion delights in the fall of one so noble. Yet it was necessary. Persia could not survive both champions at war endlessly. Through the Simurgh's guidance, the story moved to its close. Rostam prevailed not because he outmatched bodily strength, but because he listened to wisdom greater than himself. Here, the epic offers more than battle's outcome. It tells how human courage must sometimes bow, must admit its limits, and wait for counsel. Rostam's triumph was not only the arrow. It was the decision to pause, to hear, to trust a voice from beyond waking. Dreams in this tradition are not shadows of thought, but bridges of light. They remind us that gentleness and guidance can arrive when action fails. For Persian listeners, this was comforting. It suggested that even in moments of impossibility, hidden answers remain. The hardest wall may carry a single opening. The strongest shield may contain a gap unseen. To see it often requires more than sight. It asks humility, patience, and the willingness to listen. Rostam carried that dream with him far beyond the battle. Songs remembered his arrow, but he himself remembered the counsel. The true victory was not force, but the harmony between mortal courage and timeless advice. His line, shaped once by feathers and by mercy, was now shaped also by the quiet of a dream. And so the story of Rostam is more than tale of swords. It is a memory of how a vision can soften despair, how wisdom can meet a warrior in silence, and how divine presence can continue through generations. The Simurgh remained unseen to the eyes of most, yet her voice settled at the heart of Persia's greatest hero, guiding him through crisis. This gentle joining of dream and strength invites reflection. Why does one mythic bird continue to appear in so many stories, across so many years of Persian imagination? Across centuries, the Simurgh never disappeared from Persian memory. Her story shifted, her shape grew new details, and yet her meaning remained steady. In every age, she stood as a figure of guidance, wisdom, and protection. This is why she is remembered not as a single tale, but as a presence woven into the fabric of culture itself. In the Shahnameh, the great Persian epic, she appears as a guardian within human history. Here she shelters Zal when he is abandoned as an infant. She gives him the gift of feathers so her aid can always be summoned, and she teaches him patience and healing. She comes again to save Rudaba in childbirth, guiding Zal through the miracle of a caesarean birth, so that Rostam may live. And once more, she visits Rostam in dream, showing the secret path when all seemed lost against Esfandiar. Through these episodes, her role is clear. She steps into human struggle when skill falters and hope fails, offering counsel instead of conquest. In Ferdowsi's telling, she is not distant from the world of men. She is woven into family, memory, and survival. For generations who listened to the Shahnameh, the Simurgh became almost a relative, an echo of protection held close to the heart art of Persian identity. But in later centuries, her wings opened again within a different kind of story. Mystical poets drew on her image, not to tell of battles or births, but to speak of the soul's search for God. In Attar's 12th century allegory, The Conference of the Birds, her role transforms. She becomes the goal of a long journey, as a flock of birds travel through valleys of temptation, confusion, and despair, seeking the Simurgh not as rescuer, but as the truth itself. When at last they reach the mountain peak, worn and humbled, they discover there is no separate being to greet them. They look upon one another and realize they are what they sought. The word Simurgh holds a hidden pun: 30 birds. The flock becomes the Simurgh, a symbol that divine presence and unity live not elsewhere, but in themselves. In Attar's vision, she is no longer protector of individuals. She is the mirror of the divine, the lesson that the many are one. This transformation did not erase her earlier role. Instead, it revealed her adaptability. In the Shahnameh, she nurtures human lives. In Attar's vision, she reveals divine truth. In both forms, she is the bridge between despair and hope, between earthly need and heaven's answer, between the seeker and the sought. To see her is to be reminded of something larger than oneself, whether it is the grace that saves or the unity that clears all division. Artists, too, found ways to paint her presence into the visible world. In manuscripts, carvings, textiles, and mosaics, she appeared again, sometimes with vast wings able to lift whales or elephants, sometimes with the beak and tail of a peacock, sometimes with the claws of a lion, and even at times with a human face. Each choice of form carried meaning. The peacock's tail spoke of abundance, fertility, and beauty. The lion's claws warned of her strength and authority, even as a guardian. The rare human aspect suggested understanding beyond the animal, a closeness to humanity itself. None of these shapes erased the others. Each was accepted as an aspect of the same enduring truth, recognized the moment her wings stretched across a page or a wall. And her image was not bound inside Persia alone. Representations appear in Armenian and Georgian art, and echoes of her form reached even the Eastern Roman world. Under the Kurdish name Simurgh, she lived on in tales where she still brings aid to heroes and protects her young. When a symbol holds qualities as deep as wisdom, mercy, and protection, it can pass easily across borders while keeping its essence intact. Part of her endurance is tied to her place in cosmology. In the oldest images, she rests within the tree of life, the home, rising from the waters at the world's center. When she stirs her wings, the branches scatter seeds across every land. These seeds cure sickness, renew fertility, and remind humanity that life itself is replenished through her motion. To describe her was not only to tell a story, it was to tell how the world continues. In times of famine or illness, her image reminded people there was always a deeper renewal waiting. Plants could grow again. Wombs could bear again. Health could return. The Simurgh's shadow was a promise that the earth itself remained generous. For these reasons, mothers, healers, and seekers claimed her as a symbol across generations. Where fear of illness struck, she stood as guardian of cures. Where childbearing brought peril, she reminded families of hope. Where loneliness or division threatened, she appeared as bridge. Her meanings shifted in form but never in core. Wisdom, healing, compassion, and protection. This is why her memory appears again in so many different kinds of texts, epic, mystical, and poetic. Some tell of her speaking every language and knowing all times. Others emphasize her tenderness, noting that she is by nature benevolent, not destructive. She is called when life teeters on a knife's edge, and her answer is always one of guidance. Even her mixed forms reflect this truth. To wear lion's claws and dog's head and peacock's tail all at once is to show that she draws qualities from many places: strength, loyalty, beauty, endurance. A fixed figure belongs to one generation. A flowing, adapting image can be carried forever. Through these stories, the Simurgh became more than a creature. She became both memory and metaphor, shimmering presence at the center of Persian imagination. She is at once real for listeners who trusted her aid and symbolic for poets who sought to name the unseen. She belongs to both history and longing. So tonight, as her image passes through your thoughts, it need not be caught in detail or title, bird or beast, sacred tree or shining feather. The meaning is simpler and more constant. Her presence has lasted because humanity has always needed kindness, wisdom, and hope. Her wings belong to no single century. They drift quietly into wherever people call for mercy. Close your eyes gently and picture those wings stretched wide. See them not as fixed shape carved in art, but as a feeling passed from story to story. She was the guardian of Zal, the guide of Rostam, the truth revealed to Attar's seekers. She endures because people continue to carry her in memory whenever they need protection or healing. Her image endures wherever people need mercy and hope. And as you rest with that thought, you may begin to wonder what it means for you now. For even the oldest tales carry something forward into the lives of those who listen. What do we see when feathers from myth brush against our lives today? This is the heart of finding ourselves in the feathers. They are not only relics in a tale of kings and heroes. They are images of qualities already living within us: patience, forgiveness, and quiet resilience. Old stories hold up these feathers as something to be treasured, something always near, even when unseen. Attar, the poet of the 12th century, offered one of the most enduring mirrors. He wrote of birds who longed for the Simurgh, traveling across valleys of temptation, fear, and doubt. But when, at last, 30 birds reached their destination, they found not a radiant being apart from them. They found a lake, and in its still surface they saw themselves reflected. The word Simurgh, 30 birds, revealed its hidden truth. What they sought outside had always lived within. That vision of reflection can rest in us too. Consider Zal, the white-haired child abandoned at birth. His difference first marked him as omen and curse. Yet over time it became his strength and his sign of endurance. What had been feared by his father became what carried him into reconciliation and into wisdom. In every telling, difference became gift. So you may pause to wonder, what of your own marks, habits, or memories that feel heavy? How many times have you thought of them as flaws, as curses whispered upon you? This old tale suggests they may be more. Like the birds, you may have searched far for answers, hoping to find them in distant places. Yet what you sought might already rest in the reflection you carry. The Simurgh, as guardian and as mirror, reminds that the gifts you wait for may already be yours. Her feathers help us see this. In old stories, a single feather could heal wounds or call the bird herself to aid. Read gently. Those feathers become reminders of our inner resources. You might imagine them as your patience, fluttering softly, or as your kindness, waiting quietly until needed, or your ability to forgive, resting like a plume until called to rise. They are not trinkets given from outside. They are already yours. The bird only teaches you to see them. Forgiveness itself runs like a thread through every part of the myth. Zal forgave his father. That act turned rejection into renewal. It restored family, and from that embrace the line of heroes continued. Attar's birds, heavy with flaws, found unity together only when they accepted what they first feared to face. And for us too, forgiveness makes space where bitterness would have lingered. It does not erase pain, but makes room for life to breathe. Think of Rudaba's birth chamber. She lay between life and death, mother and child trembling on the edge of silence. The Simurgh gave instruction, gentle, steady, enough to open a path where all human knowledge had failed. Healing began when Zal trusted her words and acted with patience. In us too, there are moments where guidance comes not with clamor, but as a quiet voice, reminding us to pause, to breathe, to wait for the small opening toward life. The burned feather becomes a symbol not only of external rescue, but of the strength within us when all else feels impossible. The Simurgh's image today stretches beyond poetry and myth. She appears in books, films, music, in patterns of jewelry and on public walls of gardens and fountains. She stands as symbol of Iranian heritage, of resilience, of cultural memory carried even across distance. For those far from the homeland, she becomes reminder that identity endures even when scattered. Her great wings, painted and cast, hold memory and hope. If her feathers can carry so many meanings across centuries, then perhaps our own peculiarities, once scorned, may also hold strength across time. Yet there is the tension we know well. To be marked as different can feel like isolation. Zal knew it as an infant, when all eyes turned away. Each bird in a tar's tail confessed its own flaw with shame. You may know it too, when a habit, a memory, or even your appearance feels like wall between you and others. Culture, family, even your own thoughts might call it curse. The stories answer in gentle rhythm, wait. In what seems curse may already hide gift. The mountain that appeared grave became cradle. The flaw that seemed burden became doorway into truth. The lesson unfolds without force. It is not command, but invitation. Differences need not be hidden. Wounds need not close into silence. Forgiveness may feel harder than anger, but it lightens the path. Self-acceptance may appear impossible, yet it reveals the reflection you had mistaken for absence. The Simurgh sets no throne before us, but opens a sky and asks us to notice we can rest beneath our own wings. So rest a moment with this image. Imagine a vast bird, radiant yet calm, folding her wings as a shelter. Imagine her feathers brushing softly over you, not from somewhere else, but drawn from within. In her presence, Zal found peace. In her guidance, Rostam found strength. In a tar's parable, unity revealed itself in 30 becoming one. In your own heart, feathers wait as well. Patience, compassion, resilience, ready to rise when needed. The treasure is not that feathers alone healed, or that feathers summoned miracles. The treasure lies in what they stand for, the ability to forgive, to turn judgment into mercy, to see difference as gift. They are traits stronger than palaces, more enduring than battles. They belong not to one culture or one age, but to every life ready to remember them. Now imagine the mountain nest as quiet space for yourself. Feathers gather around, dimming the noise. Forgiveness flows in like water, easing what was tight. Self-acceptance feels like seeds falling on soil ready to bloom. Unity appears like the calm surface of a lake, reflecting not flaws, but wholeness. Let yourself linger there softly. Each breath becomes a way of lifting those inner feathers. Each exhale drifts like plumage carried by air. What once felt like rejection might become the starting shape of wisdom. What once felt like absence may prove another form of blessing. Picture the feathers folding close around you now. You breathe in, wings widen. You breathe out, wings close. Within that rhythm you rest, and in resting, you may sense what the stories have always whispered, that even from abandonment and difference, love and resilience can rise. This is where the tale prepares us gently for what follows. For within the feathers, within the quiet breath, lies the simple truth. Even what seems most cursed can become the beginning of strength. Let this story of Zal and the Simurgh rest gently with you now. It carries a quiet reminder. What feels like loss can one day become a hidden source of calm, forgiveness, and strength. Even in rejection, love can gather, and in difference, wisdom can bloom. If this tale brought you comfort, you may choose to subscribe for more quiet stories when you wish. For now, close your eyes and breathe. Let the hush of the mountain and the shelter of wings guide you softly into sleep.